Today, more and more people are becoming aware that they possess appetites that could be considered depraved by the established order. Reddit forums, social media, hyperconnectivity, and the constant bombardment of stimuli, offers, and desires seem to produce a collective burnout that has pushed a significant part of the population toward new and marginal forms of consumption. This has to do with the expansion of commodity fetishism, with the way in which everything becomes an object of consumption, but also with how, within late capitalism and the tendency toward commodity fetishism, there's an unconscious association between being a good consumer and being a good person, a good citizen, an integrated individual. In Marx, commodity fetishism has a fairly precise meaning. Social relations between people appear to us as relations between things. A commodity seems to possess value in and of itself, when that value actually derives from a particular social organization of labor. But late capitalism takes this much further. We no longer simply buy objects to satisfy needs. We buy signs, experiences, identities, and ways of relating to other people. Here, Baudrillard becomes especially important. In a consumer society, the object is no longer consumed solely for its utility. It is consumed for what it means. And this produces something very interesting. The individual begins to consume themselves as a commodity. They have to be attractive, interesting, productive, desirable, healthy, sexually competent, socially visible, and so on. The person simultaneously becomes both consumer and commodity. The integrated individual is the one who works, earns an income, consumes, presents themselves socially, maintains their employability, and consumes again. Many forms of deviance can therefore be interpreted as an interruption of this chain. This is why the contemporary good citizen increasingly tends to be, simultaneously, a good worker, a good consumer, a good taxpayer, a good user of services, a good producer of data, and, increasingly, an attractive commodity for other consumers. The system turns everything into an object of consumption, including people. But the other side of this process is that, for these objects to be consumed, they need consumers. An integrated person is therefore someone who consumes and who makes themselves available to be consumed within the market. And in this context, even rebellion can be absorbed. Your anti-system identity can become a t-shirt. Your sexuality can become an industry. Your anxiety can become an app. Your spiritual quest can become a subscription. Your political dissent can become monetizable content. And here a fascinating paradox emerges. Capitalism does not need to eliminate deviance. It can turn it into a commodity. More and more people are able to identify, name, explore, and eventually commodify desires that previously remained repressed, unspeakable, or socially illegitimate. The internet has produced a gigantic cartography of human desire. In the past, there could be an individual with fantasy they considered absolutely aberrant who would never encounter another person who shared it. Now they can search for it. They can find a community. They can find content. They can find an industry. They can find an identity. They can find a market. And eventually, they can become producers themselves of what they initially consumed. Capitalism progressively transforms the subject into a consumer of objects, while simultaneously transforming the subject into an object that can itself be consumed. A person on Tinder is both consumer and product. An OnlyFans creator is both consumer and commodity. An influencer is both consumer and commodity. A worker is both consumer and a commodity in the labor market. A politician is a consumer of attention and a political commodity. A social media user is a consumer of content and a producer of data. The distinction between subject and object begins to erode. Marx argued that the worker sells their labor power as commodity. But digital capitalism introduces an additional dimension, as the individual begins to turn virtually every aspect of themselves into a potential commodity. Their image, their attention, their body, their relationships, their opinions, their intimacy, their sexuality, their personality, their experience. The system needs integrated subjects in order to reproduce itself. But integration requires those subjects to develop an ever-increasing capacity for consumption and for the commodification of themselves. This is where the so-called inevitable call of the abyss resides. The black hole into which many believe they are falling amid this hyper-accelerated flow of constant desires, where we consume and where we are consumed. And that is the key. This process is transversal throughout the system. The very functioning of these mechanisms makes it impossible not to feel the call of the abyss, makes it impossible not to look over the edge, and therefore makes that slow and cruel fall inevitable. Create a new egregore. Subscribe and ring the bell before the American dream comes to an end.